The anime opens by introducing us to a group of explorers in the middle of a glacier. Buried deep in the ice, they find a woman who immediately begins speaking to them. She tells them she has been trapped and resting there for at least 1,000 years, and she refers to herself as a former goddess. Without giving much context, she tells the humans to bring her the best player of this era. In a scene change, a reporter explains that humanity is currently engaged in the gods' games, a world in which humans are challenged by various gods. Right then, we see a young man walking through the city. His name is Faye, and he is the protagonist of our story. He watches a screen showing a god's game in progress. The humans attempting to defeat the gods end up losing as usual, and everyone watching is disappointed again. Faye thinks he should leave since he himself was a challenger, and because he is well known and people start recognizing him on the street, he makes his way to an office building. Several people stare in amazement as he passes, and a secretary receives him at the entrance. Faye tells her he has come looking for a girl who is responsible for teaching him to play. After a long conversation, the secretary tells him he needs to go up to floor 17 because someone wants to see him. On the way up, she informs him that the person waiting is the woman they found frozen in the glacier, who apparently turned out to be a goddess from 3,000 years ago. During one of the gods' games, she had gone into hiding but fell asleep and ended up frozen solid. The secretary makes clear just how powerful this woman is, though the woman herself insists she is a former goddess who has lost much of her power. Even so, the secretary finds her deeply intimidating. When they arrive at the door, the secretary tells Faye that he will be the goddess's guardian since she has descended to the human world, and they do not fully understand why. They have not dared to ask her directly either, because she could get angry and literally kill all of them. That is why they brought Faye, who apparently possesses something called an immortal arise which prevents him from dying. They enter the room and Faye notices it is filled with board games. The goddess appears and we learn her name is Lesia, though we will simply call her Lesia. Faye has a small memory from his childhood, as if the two of them are somehow connected without being able to remember how. After a long exchange, the secretary leaves and Faye and Lesia stay to play a game as a way of introducing themselves to each other. Faye is extremely intelligent. When he sees Lesia shuffling the cards, he asks if he can do it instead. This surprises Lesia because she immediately senses this is no ordinary human. Having memorized the entire deck in just seconds, Lesia knows they are going to have a genuinely clean and competitive game and is impressed that he is essentially challenging a goddess. She launches the cards into the air and shuffles them in her own three-dimensional way. Faye immediately reads the tridimensional format she has set up and knows this will not be easy, but he is not afraid of anything because he is a complete professional when it comes to the gods' games. The game begins and Faye picks up two cards which indicate a place of origin and a blood type. Lesia tells him that on her turn she must pull the matching pair for those same cards. Faye, curious, asks how hot the blood of a god actually is. She tells him that if she were to spill even a little inside this building, it would collapse entirely. She also positions herself in a very eye-catching way and Faye gets flustered noticing she is not wearing anything underneath, to which Lesia says she finds it extremely uncomfortable that humans wear undergarments. Then Lesia picks two cards on her turn but fails to complete the pair. Faye, as a professional, tells her the card she needs is behind her, and he completes his own pair for the place of origin. Lesia tells him she came from a place called elements, which is what humans refer to as the upper spiritual plane. She also explains there is a gate through which humans can enter the home of the gods, and that is where humans are summoned to play all of the gods' games. Faye tells her he already knows about that gate because he was in the gods' games 6 months ago. As images of the world are shown to us, the secretary who is watching them explains that the gods grew hungry for games and gave humans the right to challenge them whenever they wish. Lesia also explains that Faye is an apostle. Apostles possess superhuman abilities or magical power called arise which they can use to challenge the gods, and if they manage to win they receive a portion of arise as a reward. With this power they can expand their territories since 93% of the earth is inhabited by extremely dangerous creatures. After a long game, Faye thinks he is close to obtaining all the information he wants, but unexpectedly Lesia draws two blank cards which allow her to ask him anything. With an intimidating aura, she asks him why he approached her and warns him she will end him if he lies. Faye confesses everything and tells her he was sent to keep watch over her. Unexpectedly, Lesia calms down completely and tells him she knows he is telling the truth, and she thinks he is an honest human. Faye then lets her know that his real intention was never to win the game, but only to obtain certain information from her. He asks her why, being a goddess, she has not returned to elements, and why she specifically chose him to come here. She tells him it is because he carries a mark indicating 3 consecutive victories against the gods. She then confesses that because she abandoned the gods' world for 3,000 years she can no longer return, and so she asks him to become her partner to challenge the gods in their games. Faye, a little bewildered, asks what the purpose of all this is. She tells him it is because if she defeats a god she can become one again. After a long conversation, Lesia takes Faye by the hand and leads him to the immersion center where the divine gate to the gods' games is located, telling him their new adventure as partners in the games has begun. After crossing through they arrive at the upper spiritual plane where a monster is attacking the structures of the area. Just as a rock is about to fall on Lesia, she uses a little of her strength to shatter it effortlessly. Faye is stunned and she tells him that was not even close to 100% of her power. Seeing that Faye was worried about her, she starts teasing him immediately. We then go back to a few minutes before this. They entered the world of elements, and both notice something is off about the area due to the god who rules it. Lesia admits that even as a goddess she does not personally know the other gods. Faye then runs into some old colleagues who were already there, and a girl named Asta welcomes him after such a long time. When Lesia comes to greet the group, they are stunned to find themselves looking at the famous dragon goddess Lesia. She reassures them that this time she is on the side of the humans. The group is interrupted when a creature arrives and introduces itself as Meep, welcoming them to the territory of its master titan. Miranda, who is watching everything through screens, explains that humanity's desire is to win 10 times against the gods, after which something happens that is not revealed to us yet. Everyone assumes the Titans game will involve fighting, but Meep informs them its master grew bored of that game and now they will play God Tag. After explaining all the rules, the Titan appears and Meep declares the game has begun. Back in the present, Faye and the others run at full speed. They hide beneath a building, but because Asta insists on hiding inside one of the buildings, she is discovered by the Titan. He tags her and everyone thinks she has been eliminated, but she begins attacking the group instead. Faye realizes this is a variation of God Tag because once tagged a player becomes an ally of the Titan and goes after the remaining players. One by one, the Titan manages to convert the rest of the group, while Lesia and Faye run at full speed. Asta pursues them and Faye wonders why only half of her body seems to react differently. They devise a plan, and after trapping her in a trash container they touch her feet, and she returns to normal. There was a hidden rule that participants can recover their converted companions by touching them. This makes the Titan realize they have discovered the secret trick of his game, so both sides begin running while Faye thinks through how to win. After running for a while, they find the rest of their converted companions. Both of them run again and Faye breaks a bridge between buildings to buy a little more time. They figure that if this continues, the monster will surround them along with the converted allies. They think that if they had more companions, they could try to come up with ideas, and Faye has a brilliant plan for how to win. Just then, the rest of the apostles begin closing in on both of them from all sides. Lesia and Faye split up, and what follows turns out to be a trap because Faye reaches the rooftop of a building where the Titan is waiting. The monster hits Faye with a single strike and everyone panics thinking Faye is finished, but he is completely unscratched thanks to a powerful ability he has. He tells the Titan that thanks to his immortality ability he can come back even after being hit. And he also deduced that you can win the game by destroying all the buildings, because as a genius he figured out that the game consists of 3 games in total, and that as buildings have been destroyed it functions like a board game. Lesia also arrives where Meep originally explained the rules to them. Faye begins explaining to the Titan every detail he discovered about its game. Right then, Lesia uses one of her abilities to throw all the allies who were touched by the monster. She then takes advantage of them being neutralized to restore them all back to normal. And finally, Faye informs the Titan that since there are no more buildings left, the game is essentially over, because the true goal of the game was to see who had more players on their side. Faye wins, and the god even lifts him up in its hand as a symbol of respect. Several hours later, Faye meets up with Miranda, who tells him it had been more than a month without any apostle winning. She also tells him they had never had so many people watching them. She points out that he and Lesia made a great team together, and nobody would believe it was actually all improvised. Faye tells her he felt a connection with Lesia, and that just by looking at her, he could understand everything she was planning. Miranda congratulates him and tells him that before he arrived, Lesia had been playing board games alone, because she was so good that nobody in the place could give her any real competition. But since Faye arrived, she has been much more comfortable. Finally, Miranda tells him the real God's games are coming very soon and he needs to prepare. She also hands Faye a card which makes him very happy because it was something he had been looking for since he arrived. A little while later, Faye goes to see Lesia, who is reviewing everything they saw in the game. She points out they could have used other paths or strategies to win much more easily. Very curious, she asks Faye what he plans to do when he wins 10 Gods games. It is then that we learn that, after winning 10 games against the gods, a person can wish for anything they want. Lesia says she would like to become a goddess again, but Faye simply says he wants to see a person he used to play with as a child. He tells her he never knew her name, but he used to call her his sister, and at this moment a small memory is revealed of the two of them playing together. Her face is shown, and she looks remarkably like Lesia. This is actually why Faye was so struck when he first saw Lesia. Lesia tells him it is a very interesting wish. Faye adds that he can remember the color of her hair and that it was like Lesia's. Lesia teases him because it clearly cannot be her since she spent 3,000 years frozen in a glacier, but she wishes him luck in finding that girl. Several hours later, both of them arrive at Miranda's place in the middle of the night. Miranda is frustrated because she was in her robe and wanting to sleep. Faye explains he only came to have Miranda confirm something for Lesia, who did not believe him about how many people are needed to participate in the gods' games. Miranda explains they need at least 10 people to enter the games, because with a small group the odds of winning drop to just 4%. So she tells Faye he will need to find other apostles he gets along with well and bring them along with Lesia. After a long while, Faye and Lesia head off to find people, and he mentions a group called Blaze that might be able to help them. He calls the captain of Blaze through his communication bracelet, and the captain is happy to hear Faye wants to join, but he is not pleased when he learns Lesia would also be part of the group. Because she is a former goddess who once overheard some apostles mocking the games while drunk and gave them such a beating that they ended up in the hospital. Lesia gets nervous and admits she did hit them for mocking the games. The captain apologizes to Faye, but even though the girl is beautiful, he cannot accept her into the group. Faye then calls another captain named Yuki and asks if she has space in her group. Yuki tells him her group Black Rose is exclusively for people they choose themselves, and she could open up a spot for him. When she hears that he needs a second spot for the goddess Lesia, she completely loses it and hangs up. Faye asks Lesia if she did something to Yuki's team as well, and Lesia very nervously admits that in the past few months she went to a combat arena to practice, and her first opponent was Yuki, whom she sent to the hospital with her extraordinary power. Faye starts getting frustrated because at this rate no team will ever accept them. Lesia apologizes for everything she has done, and Faye understands she only wants to learn and play with humans. So he tells her that if they cannot join any existing team, they will start looking for people with exceptional talents. Right in front of them, a girl appears named Pearl who arrives using her teleport ability. Both of them think she could be a great addition, so they start following her. Just as Pearl is about to submit her resignation from the apostles, Lesia burns the documents. Pearl is initially upset, but when she hears it is the goddess Lesia, Faye calms her down and she agrees to hear them out. While they talk, Faye thinks that even though Pearl has only one victory and is level 1, her teleport ability makes her quite powerful. However, he finds it strange that she would want to retire as an apostle. After checking her information on his bracelet, he asks her directly if she is planning to quit because of a recent defeat. Pearl sadly confirms it because they lost because of her. When the monster was about to attack her, she used an ability called Shift Chain which swapped her position with her captain, causing the captain to be defeated and making them lose the match. She feels terrible because even one member of the team quit after it became their third consecutive loss, and she thinks her abilities are not as good as she believed. Lesia tells her she understands the situation and invites her to join their group, promising that even if she makes a mistake, she will never be blamed for it. Despite hearing these words, Pearl runs off and teleports away. Faye thinks he should find out where she lives because she is a very valuable person who could contribute to their team, and if she quits now, she will always be afraid of failure and of the games. A few hours later, they manage to find where she lives and notice the door is open. Faye walks in without thinking and runs into Pearl wearing only her underwear. Lesia, seeing Pearl's figure, is immediately filled with envy. After a moment, Pearl apologizes because it was her fault for leaving the door open. since she always uses teleport and genuinely forgot to close it properly. Pearl begins explaining that she was originally just like Faye when she started, because she was a huge admirer of his as he was becoming champion of the games. But ever since the incident with her captain, she has felt she is not capable of helping anyone and just holds people back. She also shows them some bags of candy she had prepared for her old team as an apology. Lesia gets fired up and tells her that it does not matter if they lose the games because of one person, since the gods only want the participants to have fun, and if they lose they can just play again. Faye adds that if Pearl joins them now, it is a great opportunity to rebuild her reputation, because he intends to help her old group understand that she is actually a very valuable person. Pearl remembers for a moment what happened in that match, and then accepts Faye's invitation with tears in her eyes, thanking them because nobody had ever insisted so strongly on having her be part of a team. Several days later, the group is at the entrance to Elements to challenge one of the gods. Pearl is a bit regretful and even trembling with fear. Miranda, on the other hand, bends a few rules to be able to tell Faye which day Pearl's old team would be arriving. But she lets them enter with the old team because of Faye's outstanding reputation. Lesia, seeing how frightened Pearl is, offers her some encouraging words. After entering, the group begins falling from the sky and a gigantic dragon appears beneath them known as Ouroboros. This makes Faye excited, and he announces it is time to take down this monster, quite unlike the rest of the group from the other team and Pearl, who are utterly stunned by the enormous creature. As they fall, Faye tells Pearl to use her teleport, but she explains her limitations, so Lesia uses a gravity ability to slow their descent. However, just before they land on the monster, it hits them with a solid strike. After walking a bit across the creature's body, they run into the captain of Pearl's old team, who tells them he does not need their help. He also informs them the game has already started, and they have already lost 4 companions who could not withstand the fall. One of those lost was actually devoured by another creature that appeared, a kind of flying whale that eats anyone who falls off the dragon. The captain believes the god they drew is extremely difficult since it has an unbeaten record, and if they lose again, several of them will be eliminated from the games permanently. He gives some words of encouragement, and then Meep appears from this game, looking very sad and saying there is not much point explaining the rules since they simply need to make the gods say a specific word. And to make things even more complicated, they need to figure out what that word is with no clues given. After a while, the dragon's head arrives, and they are all enclosed in an electric field. The group starts shouting random words, and Meep gives them a small hint about what has already been said. They need to be quick about it. Faye says a phrase, and they discover the correct word is the expression like when you stub your toe. The group then sets out because they need to cause the dragon enough pain to make it say that phrase. But after multiple attempts, it proves useless since the dragon has an extraordinarily tough and resistant hide. After thinking it through, Lesia uses a powerful attack against the dragon, which even sends one of the other group's members flying and into the flying whale. But despite the massive impact, the dragon says absolutely nothing. Lesia apologizes to the others from the other group, and the captain accepts the goddess's apology. Faye thinks this game will be quite difficult to complete, but mentions the flying whales surrounding the dragon and waiting for someone to fall. Pearl gets very scared and clings tightly to Faye, which makes Lesia jealous and furious at seeing Pearl press herself against Faye. Lesia then remembers that even in ancient times, the gods used to mention that certain things could make even a god fall. This motivates Pearl, and both girls start running to explore the dragon together. After a long while, the group reaches the dragon's tail. They notice one of the scales looks suspicious, so Pearl draws a conclusion, and after getting Faye's approval, she hits it. This activates a trap, and laser beams start shooting from the tail in every direction. The captain gets angry at Pearl, but Faye immediately points out that this trap must be part of some forbidden rules. He also tells everyone the last thing they should do is blame each other. Lesia agrees and thinks the dragon may have shown them this as a trap, but it must be something different. Faye sits down to think, while members of Pearl's old team start saying they want to give up. But one of them points out they cannot because this loss would be their 3rd consecutive defeat, and they could be completely removed from the gods' games. So they start blaming Pearl for everything, which enrages Lesia, who declares they are the ones truly responsible and that nobody sent them there to blame their own companions. As a former goddess, she also reminds them they should be enjoying the games. Meanwhile, Faye figures out the game and announces he is going to activate the traps again. He acknowledges there will be casualties, but they will end up winning. The captain's group thinks Faye is insane, but he tells them to trust him. Faye asks Lesia to hit the scale again with full force to damage the dragon. After the impact, the dragon gets angry and fires a powerful laser at them. The group manages to protect themselves thanks to a magic shield from Lesia, and the laser ends up destroying several of the flying whales. These begin slamming their bodies against the dragon since they are not guardians at all but neutral monsters of the game. The group takes advantage of this and climbs onto one of the whales. Meep gets extremely excited, saying nobody had ever reached this stage before. They start thinking of a plan to hit the dragon's weak point and discover it is underneath the dragon where there are eyes that also function as a defense. They need to destroy those eyes to make the dragon say the word they need. Laser beams begin shooting from the eyes as a defensive measure. Lesia thinks of a plan and Faye immediately reads what she is planning, so he tells Pearl they are going to need her to use one of her abilities at exactly the right moment. Faye then creates a distraction so Lesia can land a hit. She manages to do so, but the monster immediately fires a powerful laser at her. This gives Faye time to get close to the other eye. And just as the dragon fires a laser from its second eye, Pearl teleports it toward them, making the god hit its own eye with its own attack. Faye thinks to himself that the only way to bring down a god is clearly another god. The captain and his team watching from outside realize Faye's team is extraordinary. He also acknowledges that in the end Pearl was always a great girl and they should never have voted her out. The dragon god Ouroboros then appears before Faye and the group, congratulating them on their great effort in defeating it. Ouroboros also tells them that because of their extraordinary effort it will give them a fragment of its eyes. Faye is stunned to receive a divine tiara. Ouroboros explains that this artifact can summon it whenever they wish. The group is even more astonished hearing this since it could be very useful in future games. Ouroboros also warns them that next time the game will be much more difficult and asks them to prepare to play again. Everyone thinks the goddess is insane though because nobody would dare play another game if it is even harder than this one. In a scene change, a girl named Nell is having a nightmare about a god. She wakes up startled and realizes she fell asleep with the television on. She then hears some words Faye had spoken and feels motivated to one day become like him. Ouroboros was already one of the most difficult gods to defeat. Back with the group, Lesia is furious at Miranda for not letting them through the divine gates. Miranda explains that since the moment they beat the god, everyone has been completely inspired and the halls are now packed, so they will have no available space for a month. Lesia quietly pulls Pearl aside to suggest they go to another city and steal a divine gate, which makes Pearl very nervous. Faye asks Miranda if there is any other way to participate in the games, and Lesia starts losing her mind. Miranda says there is one option, and it is the World Game Tour. The next day, the group travels by train through a desert. The girls comment that their ancestors accomplished something very difficult because they opened territories and fields so people could be safe and could mine and perform other difficult tasks. We then learn that the day before Miranda had told them, they received invitations to participate in the tour at the holy spring city of Malra. Back in the present, after several hours of travel, the group all falls asleep on the train. The next day, the group finally arrives in the city, and they spot Nell for some reason holding a banner with their names on it. The group sees this and starts running, but Nell has an ability that dramatically increases her speed. After catching them, she tells Faye she wants to be his subordinate and needs him to be her teacher at any cost. She even offers to do anything he asks, including pleasant things. Faye gets very nervous and the girls on the other hand get completely jealous. Nell kneels and begs him, but they take advantage of the moment and run away at full speed. Nell gets distracted and ends up right in the middle of the street. When a car is about to hit her, she uses her ability and kicks the car out of the way. After managing to escape from Nell, they arrive at a place where a man named Belliger receives them. He informs them that they will be playing in the games in 3 days and around 10,000 people will be watching. Pearl gets excited because it will literally be a full stadium. After reaching Belliger's office, the group is surprised to see photos of former tournament winners on the walls. Their moment is interrupted when a young man named Dax arrives. Faye is surprised to see him wearing a black uniform. Belliger clarifies that Dax is a newcomer who managed to beat a god in his very first match, so the black uniform marks him as someone of elite level. He is also the representative of the Malra branch. The atmosphere gets a bit intense between Dax and Faye, but Dax suddenly tells Faye he has been gathering the best newcomers from around the world and invites him to be the final member of his team to win 10 games against the gods. Faye does not seem particularly interested and tells him he only came to participate in the World Game Tour. Dax accepts his decision, immediately leaves, and Faye thinks to himself that even though Dax is gone, he knows he has not given up entirely. Later that night, Faye explains that apparently Nell had to leave her group a month earlier due to what actually happened. During one of the trials, the god managed to eliminate one of their members and only 3 of them remained. Since they needed 4 people, the captain passively gave up, which made Nell furious because she never wanted to do that. The group talks about how Nell is not so bad after all, since she previously had 3 victories and 3 losses. Their conversation is interrupted when Nell arrives in disguise as a staff member. The group immediately recognizes her, and when she realizes she is caught, she runs out of the building. Outside, Nell regrets having run away, and Dax then appears before her. He tells her she has a lot of talent and just ended up with a bad team that did not support her, so he offers her a spot on his team. However, Nell refuses because she wants to be part of Faye's team. She challenges Dax by pointing out that she knows tomorrow there will be a friendly match between his team and Faye's, and she assures him Faye will win. The next day, Faye's group is ready to head into the stadium for the match. Nell arrives to wish them good luck and tells them she will be cheering from the stands. She also warns them that Dax has a lot of talent and they should be paying attention. Then she runs off again. Shortly after, Dax approaches Faye and says he expects the best Faye has to offer since they will be competing as representatives of 2 cities, and he does not intend to look bad as Malra's representative. Faye tells him very calmly that he means no offense but considers Dax to be someone who is completely passionate about everything he does. Dax then announces the game selection, and to make it random, they will choose someone from among the 10,000 people present in the stadium. 2 spells activate in the arena, and Faye is shocked, asking if what he is seeing is augmented reality. Various square and yellow diamond-shaped objects begin appearing throughout the arena. Faye recognizes it as the game Sugaroku, a kind of card game he knows perfectly well from having played it before. He thinks that since he is very quick with these things, it might not be as complicated as he expected, but at the same time he wonders if Dax is just as good as him. Pearl gets very excited seeing what kind of game they will be playing. Dax reassures Faye, saying it is also his first time with this particular game. Dax then selects his partner, who is Kurlik. Dax thinks Faye will pick the dragon goddess simply because of how powerful she is, but Lesia tells Pearl that she will support them from the stands since she believes Pearl is already strong enough to help Faye. The rules are explained. They must advance 44 spaces to win the game, or they can use trap and magic cards to reduce the 20 life points their opponents have. After a long explanation, Pearl and Faye realize they have some very unusual cards, but are not sure whether to select the healer and traveler classes if they want to reach the goal faster. After thinking for a few seconds, Faye selects the traveler class and Pearl selects the healer class. Meanwhile, Dax and Kurlik select the mage class since they plan to eliminate the group's 20 life points to win. The game begins and Faye teleports to one of the spaces while Dax does the same. And after teleporting close to Faye, he activates his most powerful secret card, which fires into the sky and lightning strikes begin hitting all over the arena, costing the group 4 life points. Pearl then makes her move to another space, but Kurlik also immediately attacks, costing both of them points. Faye and Pearl are very nervous, seeing that after just 2 moves they have already lost 5 life points. Pearl gets fired up and decides to fight back. She takes an offensive card and creates a powerful fire tornado that hits Dax. Dax informs her that he will immediately return the pain she just caused and draws a card that fires ice crystals. Pearl then tries to use a card that will help her recover many life points, but Dax uses a quick card that cancels Pearl's healing magic. Kurlik very confidently says Pearl is essentially finished, but just as Pearl is about to be attacked, Faye throws a card that causes her to take much less damage. Faye also switches position and manages to hit Dax with a Divine Lightning card that removes 5 life points. He also holds onto a card that allows him to help Pearl recover life points as well. This gives Pearl time to use her cards and cause even more damage. The crowd is amazed watching Kurlik and Dax's life points drop considerably. The third round begins, and after advancing a bit, Pearl draws 2 cards from the deck and activates a protective barrier. Faye uses his traveler card to advance 7 spaces ahead. Kurlik then decides to attack Pearl using her fire attack, but because Pearl had her magic barrier up, it fails to cause any damage. Dax advances and lands on one of the trap spaces. He informs them that landing on a trap does not necessarily mean it is bad for him, because he had a secret card that swaps the trap's target with one of his rivals. A lightning bolt starts hitting Pearl, and Faye uses a card to nullify all the damage she would receive. However, Dax anticipated that Faye would use a card like this and throws a card that prevents Faye from using any more cards until the current phase ends. Both of them get nervous because Kurlik used a card that would eliminate Pearl. Pearl does not look happy, and Kurlik then performs her attack to finish Pearl off. But Pearl tells her she is no burden to Lesia or Faye and announces her turn is not over yet. She activates a sacred card that restores her life when it reaches 0. After activating it, her life returns to 11 and she still has 4 cards left to attack with. Dax has the lowest life of both opponents, so she focuses on him. Faye also attacks him with his quick cards, and both of them combine their attacks. Kurlik tries to use her card, but Pearl already anticipated she would defend, so Pearl invokes an ancestral card. Dax is impressed because he did not expect Pearl to get this far without Faye. But unexpectedly, Dax uses a card that transfers all the damage he receives to his companion, who has more life. Dax very confidently thinks Pearl is finished because after this last attack her life reaches 0. Faye thinks they have won because at that moment Pearl's secret card activates, allowing her to restore her life when it reaches 0. Everyone in the stadium is completely shocked by what Faye and Pearl just did, having expected none of this. They remember that in the second phase Faye made a move nobody anticipated in order to hold onto a secret card, which turned out to be the exact card Pearl just used, putting both Kurlik and Dax in a total panic. Faye tells them that every move he has made has been for their benefit because he already anticipated all of their moves. He is simply that good at card games. Kurlik tells Faye they fell into his traps the entire time, and Faye confirms this, mentioning he used his divine lightning to distract them before holding onto the key cards. Pearl and Dax, very frustrated, cannot understand how Faye and Pearl were winning when they were just a traveler and a healer. But Faye explains he knew from the beginning that if they chose mages they would end up losing. Since they only had healing cards, they had to play with their opponents' minds. Finally, because Pearl was going to receive 20 points of damage, her secret card redirects the attack, which she sends back to Dax, leaving him with no life points and winning the game for her and Faye. Dax starts laughing and thinks it was not so bad in the end, and now they will be rivals forever. Dax promises everyone watching that they will become much stronger to win next time. But Faye is not particularly interested in being drawn into Dax's mental games. Pearl is happy they won, but notices the losers seem much happier than they are. Faye does not care much about this and sees it simply as just a game. The next day, Lesia is browsing through a store full of games, and the owner assumes she has no money to pay for them, but she pulls out a platinum credit card with no spending limit that only the wealthiest people in the world can possess, leaving the owner completely stunned. Faye reminds her Miranda asked her not to abuse the spending, but Lesia, being an absolute compulsive shopper, tells him she still has a few more stores to visit. After a while, Pearl, being quite a big eater, is eating happily and suggests they go to a famous takoyaki stand. Right at that moment, a huge crowd of fans arrives wanting photos with Lesia and Faye. They even form a long line for Faye's autograph since he is now a full celebrity in this city. Pearl initially thinks fans will also want photos with her, but gets immediately disappointed when nobody looks her way. After signing autographs for a long while, Lesia gets a little sentimental with Faye, grabs his shirt and tells him she wants his autograph too, asking him to sign her hairband. Faye, without thinking, agrees and leaves Lesia completely delighted. Right then, Pearl arrives and asks what they were doing since she saw them very close together. Just then, they hear fans taking photos and asking for autographs from Dax, who is also extremely popular in the city. Pearl informs Faye that Dax is a huge streamer who makes a lot of money from being famous. At that moment, Kurlik interrupts them and congratulates Faye on the match. She then says goodbye and goes to take pictures of Dax. Then the group realizes Nell was definitely spying on them. Nell walks away, slightly indignant at being caught, and asks Faye to let her join his group. Even though she cannot participate in the gods' games due to having lost 3 times already, she says she could be the team analyst. Faye refuses, and she tells him she would even be his servant if he wanted. But Lesia tells her to stop insisting, and Nell leaves looking very sad. Faye tells her to be less negative and to work on improving herself, adding that he will see her the next day at the arcane court. The next day, Faye's group reunites with Belliger, who wishes them good luck in elements. Nell is also there, and Faye told her to come since he is making her part of the team after all. Belliger also informs Faye that since he needs 10 members, he managed to gather 12 apostles who are already inside. After these words, the group enters. They realize they are in a kind of desert, and then Dax and Kurlik appear because both of them are part of Faye's team. The group reunites and Dax asks that they win this game. Right then, the ground begins to shake and a pyramid rises from the sand. Meep from this area arrives and welcomes them to the elements of its god. It hands everyone flowers as a gift and tells them that if they lose their flower, they will be immediately disqualified. Meep informs them that their flowers must be placed at the top of the pyramid, calling the game the Sun Relay Race. Faye realizes there are several kilometers between them and the pyramid, and there are likely traps and rivals who will try to steal their flowers. Meep confirms this and calls forth the beasts of the god before the start, and enormous cats appear. Meep also reveals that one of the beasts carries the sunflower, which is the one that must reach the pyramid. Just like the beasts, the participants also carry flowers that the beasts can steal. However, if someone picks up a black flower, they will be stunned, and it will reveal which participant has the sunflower. Faye immediately thinks they need to be very careful, because if they accidentally take the black poison flower, they could lose the game. But if they can make the beasts take it first, they could turn it to their advantage. Since Lesia with her speed could grab the flowers from the stunned cats in the 5 seconds, they are disabled. Each of them then checks which flower they have, and after analyzing each one, Faye thinks he can devise a plan to win. Faye goes over the rules and thinks Lesia should carry the sunflower since she is the fastest and no monster could catch her. But they also know there is a master play available because if the poison flower that Kurlik has were given to Lesia, the god and its beasts would think Lesia is the one carrying the sunflower. In other words, they are using reverse psychology to deceive their rival. Faye asks if they could switch flowers using their abilities, but Meep says no because using Pearl's swap ability or throwing flowers to each other would mean releasing the flower for an instant. However, it says that if one of them is in trouble, they may throw their flower, and that would be permitted. Faye knows they need to be very careful, and Dax arrives to ask who will carry the flower. One of Dax's companions is surprised because Dax always seeks leadership within the team, but Dax explains that in these games he trusts Faye to make the good decisions. Finally, one of the girls hands Faye a card with all the information about their group and their abilities, and Faye thanks her and asks for everyone's flowers. He then hands them back one by one, telling each person to look inside their flower bud again to see which flower they now have. But he tells them he will not say out loud which flower each person has because it is part of his plan, and everything should be completely anonymous. If everyone knows who has the sunflower, everyone will try to protect that person and the god will immediately know who carries it, which is an absolutely ingenious plan. Meep, seeing everyone is ready, introduces its master. The god appears with a flower in its hand, and Faye thinks it might be carrying the key. So they all get ready, and both Faye and the god announce they have the sunflower to try to deceive each other. In a scene change, our Rose appears quite annoyed because the group has not come back to play with her. She decides to change outfits and goes looking for Faye and the group. Nell, who is watching the transmission, thinks it is very possible that Pearl or Faye have the sunflower, but also wonders if the whole thing might be a mind game for the god. Meep starts the game and the group begins running toward the pyramid. The god summons all its beasts and Faye realizes there are an enormous amount of them. The god mentions there are approximately 1,667 beasts against only 15 apostles in Faye's group. Just then Kurlik starts running at full speed, but is shocked to see a cat with magical powers creating a sand tornado in front of them. The group stops for a moment, realizing there is a mage who will attack them at range. One of Faye's companions gets grabbed by the cats and has its flower stolen. Then one of the cats leaps onto Pearl and scratches her shirt, exposing her underwear, which Kurlik immediately punches it for, declaring she hates perverted cats like that one. Several others also get eliminated when their flowers are stolen. Lesia then charges a powerful strike into the ground which splits the earth in two, giving them time to start running again. But the ground immediately repairs itself because of the god's great power. The group runs a bit and spots an oasis in the distance. One of the girls thinks they should stop so Pearl can change her shirt, but right then all the cats arrive at great speed, and after another attempt to stop them, it turns out the cats even have an anti-magic shield. One of the girls gets grabbed but buys a little time by creating ice barriers. After running further, the mage cats arrive and manage to hit Dark with a whirlwind. Faye's group thinks they should stay to help him since they cannot leave a companion behind. Meanwhile, one of the eliminated participants speaks with Belliger and mentions that perhaps Pearl or Faye carry the sunflower. Nell is nearby, and they remember the bet they made regarding Faye, that if Faye wins against the god, Nell would join Dax's team. Back with Faye's group, they manage to reach the base of the pyramid. Faye tells Pearl that his flower is the real one, and they only need to place it on the altar. However, the god then congratulates him and tells him all they need to do now is climb, but immediately summons its beasts which grab Faye. Faye throws his flower to Pearl and she starts climbing at full speed. Unexpectedly, she teleports. The god thinks for a moment that she teleported to the top, but Pearl actually lands directly on the god and punches it, breaking the crystal on its staff, which allows Pearl to steal its flower. But when she opens it, she gets stunned because the god actually had the black poison flower. Pearl feels completely discouraged, and the god opens the flowers it stole from her. However, it realizes none of them is the sunflower. The location of the sunflower is then revealed to everyone, and it turns out to be in the middle of the oasis. The god is stunned at being deceived and thinks Lesia or Kurlik should have that flower. But unexpectedly, Faye arrives and shows everyone that he actually has the real flower because he had 2 flowers in his hand this entire time. When the sandstorm hit Dax, Faye had thrown the flower to Pearl through teleportation without the cats noticing this brilliant move had been made. He tells the god it was too foolish and now it will lose. The god confidently tells him he needs to get past it, but then it gets stunned because one of its own beasts stole the flower from Lesia, who had the poison flower. Finally, Faye jumps onto Kurlik, and she uses a powerful strike to launch him all the way to the top of the tower, where Faye places the flower on the altar. The god congratulates him on such a magnificent play, tells him he can keep the flower, and looks forward to a new game with him in the future. A long while later, Faye goes to Nell and tells her he knows she had bet she would join Dax's group if Faye won. Nell says she only wanted to see Faye win, and he asks if that is really all she wants. Nell gets a little sad and tells him she would have liked to join his team. Faye tells her she can join them despite having 3 losses, because since she also has 3 victories against the gods, there is a move they can make which is quite risky. Belliger confirms it is possible, but it could be quite complicated. Finally, Faye asks Belliger to call Miranda because he is thinking of challenging the god Bookmaker. Several hours later, the group is in a room discussing how this god is very different from the others. Normally, if someone beats a god, they gain a victory point. However, if someone beats Bookmaker, the god reduces defeats instead. Miranda delivers the bad news that this god can only be challenged through a very specific divine gate, which is unfortunately not in Malra. Faye knows the divine gate is in a place called Ring, and Miranda tells him that gate has not opened in roughly 40 years, since nobody dared to challenge this god just to reduce a defeat, as losing would also add another loss. Faye says he does not care and adds that he will bet one of his own victories, so Nell can challenge the god. The girls go crazy because they cannot let Faye lose one of his victories when he currently has 6 and is the closest anyone has ever been to 10. Pearl immediately interrupts and says she should be the one to bet her victory instead. Faye agrees and says she just needs Miranda's approval. Lesia observes that as a former goddess, watching Nell so focused on wanting to participate is the best thing that can happen. Miranda accepts Lesia's words and gets everything ready for them to go to Ring. After the call ends, Faye gives Nell some encouraging words, and she tells him she is only borrowing the victory because she does not plan on losing against the god. Several days later, Nell is in the middle of a game against the goddess and is visibly nervous because she considers the game extremely difficult. We then go back to a few days before Nell was in this position. The group is on a train heading toward Ring. Nell tells Faye he should feel much more proud of his victories and should not have given up one of them. We then learn that Faye actually did give one of his own victories for Nell to challenge the god. Faye tells her he is certain they can win against Bookmaker. Lesia starts pressuring Nell with a lot of information about the god, and the pressure becomes so much that Nell faints from the overload. Several hours later, the group finally arrives at Ring, where Miranda is waiting for them. Nell brings Miranda some bread rolls as an apology for everything she has been causing. She also tells Miranda she is ready to challenge the god. Hours later, the girls are at Pearl's house. Lesia falls asleep in Pearl's comfortable bed while Nell and Pearl are eating. Nell gets so overwhelmed with emotion that she hugs Pearl and thanks her for believing in her. Since the food accidentally got spilled, the girls decide they should shower. Lesia wakes up at that moment and heads somewhere else, saying she just remembered something she needs to do. A little while later, Nell is in the shower when she sees Pearl arrive completely undressed. Nell is shocked by Pearl's figure. Nell teases her saying it looks like she is carrying two enormous watermelons that look even bigger without clothes. Pearl starts getting embarrassed and asks Nell not to tease her about this because she is very shy and nobody had ever said anything about it to her before. The next day the group is assembled at the god's divine entrance. Miranda tells them there will be no cameras because the god for some strange reason makes cameras malfunction. After a long conversation, they manage to get inside and find there is a table set up like a casino. Unexpectedly, the goddess appears and has taken a form identical to Nell. She tells them her game is based on the physical manifestation of her challenger's doubts, which is why she chose to take Nell's form. After a long conversation, the girls are shocked to hear from Faye that they will actually be betting 3 of his victories, because if Nell wins, she will have all 3 of her defeats removed. Pearl panics and Faye tells her he made this decision during the night. He gives Nell his confidence and she prepares to play. The god hands her a deck of cards and tells her she knows Nell is accustomed to human games, so they will play poker. Nell deals the cards and thinks she cannot disappoint Faye. After the game begins, Faye and Lesia notice Nell has started at a disadvantage. Nell says she will bet 2 chips, but the god puts in all its chips and says it is going all in. Everyone gets very nervous because they know Nell cannot fold or she will lose. Nell also thinks maybe the god's hand is very strong. Nell thinks it over and decides to fold, which turns out to be her best decision because if she had matched the god's 5 chips she would have instantly lost, and she still has chips left to keep playing. The second game begins and Nell keeps a card and gets nervous seeing the god decided to take a card, which means it might have a very strong hand being built. The god sets a trap for Nell and she falls right into it because the god actually had bad cards and made Nell fold. This makes Nell very angry since the god completely deceived her. The god also tells her she is quite bad and her intuition is poor too, telling her she knows Nell does not actually want to win and reminding her of the words said before the match started, which was that they could not lose to the god. It simply adds that Nell actually wants to lose. Hearing these words, Nell gets extremely motivated and says she will bet her last chip and plans to win this time. The game begins and the god seems very calm in front of Nell. Nell thinks that if she gets a certain card, she could build a very good hand. However, she ends up drawing an ace and loses the match against the god. The god tells her she should have focused on winning instead of avoiding defeat, and that this just cost Faye 3 god victories. The god then makes Nell feel very bad by emphasizing she could have won, but her desperation ruined everything. Nell cannot take the pressure any longer and faints. Everyone is very worried about their friend, and the god says she had hope in them since they had not challenged it in 40 years. It had thought at least this human would be useful for something, but she ended up being a complete failure. The god then takes the victories from the mark Faye carries and says the whole thing was a complete disappointment, adding just before leaving that it had thought it would at least have a little fun. Just as the god is about to leave, Faye stops it and tells it that actually the match has just started because he was certain he was going to win the moment he accepted the game. Faye then states that now he wants to play against the god himself. Very confident in himself, he tells the god he will win and asks if it wants to play against him, announcing he will bet his last 3 victories in exchange for reversing all of Nell's losses. The god tells him it will not play against him, and unexpectedly the entire space-time of the area shatters into pieces. A gigantic casino table from the gods materializes in the room. The god tells them this place is known as the 3 traps. It also tells them they need to discover the 3 divine traps it will use against them. This clearly makes Faye very nervous since he had thought the god would play poker against him. Then the god appears before them again, now in the form of a girl, who we know as Grimoire. The goddess tells them she can take different forms depending on the heart of the challenger in the game, and this is the first time the divine casino has appeared. She also tells them that no matter what she will win because of her trap, and if they want to win they need to discover her trap and overcome it. Finally, she reveals what type of trap she will be using, which makes the girls laugh just imagining it. Faye does not understand what just happened. The game then begins. Grimoire hands him a chip and kicks it, so he must throw it into the air and choose heads or tails. After throwing it up and choosing, Faye gets it wrong. He thinks he was analyzing Grimoire and she made no unusual movements, and ultimately the game depends 50-50 on probability. The next game is with cards, and after seeing his hand, Faye thinks he could win. All the while he continues trying to decode the trap Grimoire is using, since she told him all 3 games would use the same trap. After showing his hand, Faye thinks he might have been able to win, but Grimoire shows a better hand and wins the second game. The third game then arrives and it is Pearl's turn to deal, but because she is so nervous she drops the entire deck. Faye quickly scans the fallen cards but thinks there is nothing unusual. Pearl then organizes the cards into groups of 26 and 27, one of which contains the Joker. But as the game begins, Pearl tries to leave, and Grimoire tells her she is welcome to stand behind her and watch to make sure no cheating happens. Pearl looks at her own hand and thinks nothing seems strange. After playing a bit, Faye wants the 9 of diamonds since this would let him win without picking the Joker. Even though Faye chose the card on the right and the Joker was in the middle, for some reason Grimoire made the Joker come to him. Faye is completely shocked because he had analyzed every possible position of the cards. Then it is Grimoire's turn and she draws the correct card, leaving only one card left in her hand. If Faye picks that card, he wins. The goddess tells him she had said she would win all 3 games. Faye starts thinking hard about what trap she used in all 3 games, since the girl had helped Grimoire in the card game. Faye thinks that when Grimoire picked the Joker, he felt that maybe part of the weakness of the traps showed itself in that turn, so he immediately asks the girl for a rematch of this same game. The game begins again, and after selecting several cards, Faye starts thinking through his plan again because the girl once more chose the Joker. Grimoire quite confidently tells him that even if he tries to draw her last card, he will still lose. Faye tells her she has already lost. He draws one of the cards and wins the game. Grimoire is completely shocked that her trap failed. Faye then explains that he realized the real game was actually 4 against 1. He also explains he knew her trap only worked when the god had the Joker, which is why in the previous round she had won by taking the Joker. After a long explanation, Faye realized that part of the reason was that Grimoire had selected Pearl to stand beside her in order to use Pearl's object-swapping ability. That is why Faye kept ending up with the Joker. Faye also recalls that when they arrived at this new setting, the goddess had said she analyzes both the physical and mental aspects of her challengers, meaning she knew the powers of each of them. Even though Faye discovered her trap, she asks how he managed to win in that last game since there should be no way to stop Pearl's swapping ability. Faye reminds her that Pearl cannot use that ability if more than 3 minutes have passed since she touched the person, so he simply bought time. Grimoire is deeply impressed. Finally seeing that Faye surpassed her in the games, she kisses the back of his hand and erases all the defeats Nell had, meaning from this point forward Nell can return to the gods' games. As a final question, Grimoire asks how he knew he would win, to which Faye asks the girls to show their hands and they all have 3 victories. Since they are a team, he believes they will reach 10 victories all together at the same time. Grimoire congratulates him on his decision and wishes him good luck in the rest of the gods' games. After these words, they immediately exit Elements. After returning to headquarters, the group mentions they should inform Miranda about Nell's return. But when they arrive, Miranda is very worried about some information she just received. Apparently more than 200 apostles gathered inside a giant labyrinth, and after several days none of them have returned. She explains they are in one of the games where there are infinite respawns, so no matter how many times they die, they always reappear at the starting point. Faye immediately understands this means they are trapped until someone completes the trial. The group heads to the labyrinth entrance, and Miranda tells them that apart from winning to get out, there is also an object inside that could take them out immediately, but so far nobody has been able to find it. Faye is troubled by this because it is the first time he has ever heard of people being forced to play in these competitions. He thinks he needs to figure out why the god is forcing them to play this way. Finally, Miranda tells them the most important thing is to prioritize saving the apostles through whatever is inside that can take them out. She apologizes to the group for asking this favor of them, but has full confidence they can defeat the god. Faye tells her not to worry and that he will do what he does best, and immediately they enter the game to go defeat the god. Just before entering, they find themselves in a kind of room with multiple screens showing different difficulty levels. Faye tells the girls they need to select hard mode because he believes that mode will be the only way to actually finish the game. They are then teleported to another world that seems very peaceful. However, one of the girls mentions they should keep their guard up because traps can appear at any moment. Pearl tries to pick an apple from one of the trees and it hits her back, causing her to lose and respawn at the beginning. Faye immediately realizes this is not going to be easy at all. In a scene change, Grimoire is completely bored wondering when the humans will return, hoping for someone as interesting as Faye's group. Then our Ouroboros appears asking where Faye's group went. After walking for a while, Pearl keeps getting hit by the apples. After a long walk, the group finds themselves at a kind of giant hole. Everyone thinks there is nothing unusual about it and believes maybe the god of this world is trying to distract them, so Faye asks them to keep going. Hours later, the group arrives at a kind of temple where Meep welcomes them and tells them the labyrinth actually begins from this point. It also reveals the labyrinth belongs to the god Lucimia and starts explaining all the rules. They can exit and win the game by defeating the boss at the end of the labyrinth, or as a second option, they need to find an object that will immediately let them out. After a long explanation, they finally head into the game. They arrive at a corridor and are surprised by how beautiful it is, thinking the god likes to build elegantly. They encounter some small, very fluffy creatures. Since they do not do any harm, they simply let them go and receive some wood, which they use to build a wooden shield. Faye notices the number above his head rises a bit, and as they progress, it will gradually go up until it reaches 100. They continue walking and spot another fluffy creature. Faye asks Pearl to take care of it, but unexpectedly it grows and fires flames at them, wiping out Faye's entire group. The group respawns back at the temple, and while Meep gives its introduction speech again, Faye thinks about what they need to do. Lesia also mentions she feels a bit strange because on hard mode her powers have been reduced to maintain balance. After a while, as the group walks, Lesia thinks of grabbing another fluffy creature to use as leverage against the yellow one. But right then the yellow one appears and fires its powerful fire attack, only for Nell to jump out and kick the attack straight back at it, eliminating it and making it drop a sword which Pearl thinks must be some kind of key. Nell very confidently thinks she will lead them to the end of the labyrinth, but right at that moment she gets hit by something and the whole group dies again. A little later, the group respawns at the temple and Nell apologizes for letting her guard down. Faye asks if bosses like this one reset and Meep confirms they do. So Faye now knows perfectly well that they must complete the labyrinth without a single error, because any mistake could cost them having to defeat all the bosses again. Finally, Faye gives everyone encouraging words and tells them they need to complete it successfully without blaming each other for mistakes. After a while, a group of people inside the labyrinth is seen running at full speed from a monster, because if the monster sees them with its eyes, they will be immediately defeated. Meanwhile, Faye's group has managed to craft various objects that seem pretty useless. Several hours later, while walking, they run into a group that includes an old friend of Faye's named Ashlyn. He is very happy to see Faye is also in the labyrinth. The group sit down to talk and believe they have found a gathering point room, but when they try a key shaped like a shield, it does not work. Faye's group asks if maybe the piece they need is the sword they obtained. Ashlyn goes absolutely crazy with excitement and confirms that is it. And after combining the shield and sword, a key is created at that moment. They head to the door and Ashlyn's group tells them they have a bell that warns of danger and also glasses that let them see hidden traps. After opening the door, they realize they cannot detect anything at all, so they look for some kind of mechanism that might activate a trap or monster. Lesia tells them she senses a presence ahead, and the girls also feel something strange in the atmosphere. Faye thinks maybe the monster is sleeping, so he brings out a clock he crafted and Lesia gets out her trumpet. The moment both of them activate the objects, a massive explosion is created and the entire group dies. After returning to the start of the labyrinth, Faye thinks he needs to talk to Ashlyn about how to counter the monster's attack. The group reunites with Ashlyn, and one of his companions shows a shield that reflects magic, leading them to believe the monster's attack might be magical and the shield might work. They attempt it a couple of times but keep dying, so Faye thinks they need a new plan. The entire combined group starts feeling discouraged at running out of ideas. They even try having Nell kick the attack back, but nothing happens. Faye then thinks he could use one of the umbrellas they crafted. They go back toward the monster, and after using the umbrella to block the attack, it works perfectly, but they still need to defeat the creature itself. Lesia launches herself at it, but the monster only takes 1 point of damage. They all try using magic attacks, but each attack only does 1 point of damage as well. Ashlyn asks what on earth is happening and why everything does so little damage. Everyone gets very nervous since the monster has 2.5 million hit points, meaning it would take a decade to finish it off at this rate without finding a way to deal much more damage. Then the monster attacks them and they manage to dodge it. And right at that moment they discover that when the monster creates damage on the floor, it also damages itself. After repeatedly making it damage itself, its hit points drop to 1.4 million, and after a long while of dodging its attacks, its life is reduced to just 500 hit points. Nell gets very motivated and launches herself at the monster, thinking it is finally time to finish it off. She charges her maximum attack, which is a kick, and manages to defeat the boss. It drops a resurrection bell, and Pearl gets very excited for her friend. However, Pearl starts shaking the bell and Faye begs her not to, because the object immediately causes the monster to revive with its full life. But unexpectedly, a hole opens in the ceiling and our Ouroboros herself drops through, saying she has come to be with Faye's group. She mentions that ever since Faye beat her, she had been very bored, and as the monster interrupts her mid-sentence, she takes it out with a single punch. Everyone is completely shocked by the goddess's power. Right at that moment, a lion-shaped sword begins rising from the ground, known as the Heart of Lion, which in short is the rescue object that could take them out of there. Everyone is immediately overjoyed, but Ouroboros tells them it is actually only a save point, and the game genuinely does not have an ending. Faye immediately realizes the game has a bug that prevents them from leaving even if they want to. He reminds the group of the story Meep told them, which mentioned the god is the final boss of the game. However, because the god died of boredom, there is no final boss for them to fight. In theory, the game is endless, which stuns everyone. Faye asks Ashlin's group to take the sword and leave the labyrinth to inform Miranda that this is a bug. They try it and it works, teleporting them out. At the same time, everything begins to go dark, and Meep appears giving our Ouroboros a yellow card for interfering in the game since gods cannot intervene. After explaining that the monsters are now much more difficult, the group keeps walking. Faye notices Ouroboros is following them, and she makes clear she only wants them to get out so they can go to her new game. At that moment, Ouroboros presses a button and pepper gas goes into Pearl's eyes. Faye also spots a very small and cute little sorceress and tries to pet her, but she runs away in fear. After the sorceress leaves, they encounter a fluffy creature that is sick, and it vomits on them. Faye immediately asks everyone to leave it alone and move on. After walking further, they find a door labeled Treasure Room. They think they should go back to find the key, but right then an angel appears before them. The creature calls itself the most benevolent being in the entire labyrinth and says it will grant them a wish. Pearl asks for the key to the door, but seeing the girls are dirty and covered in monster vomit, the angel purifies them and then immediately kills them. They respawn in the room where they defeated the boss, and Faye realizes that if the angel sees them contaminated, it will be offended and kill them on the spot. They also see that Ouroboros has now joined them in that room and realize she is now part of their team, which thrills the goddess as she learns she will now be an official member of Faye's team. After a while, the group continues and knows they cannot afford to run into a sick, fluffy creature or press any strange buttons. But then Nell hears a sound and discovers inside one of the rooms there is a place to rest. They also check a chest behind a waterfall and find bikinis inside, but since they need to stay focused, they continue with the game. Pearl and the others arrive at a room with apples in display cases, and one flies out and hits Pearl. Because it is rotten, it does not cause damage, but it leaves her hair messy, and an angel appears to grant them a wish. It initially agrees, but seeing the girl has rotten apple in her hair, it kills them all again. Pearl gets furious because the angel called her a contaminated girl. After a long time repeating the same obstacles, they reach the door again without being contaminated, and the angel appears. The group tells it they are clean now, and after an inspection the angel agrees, but then it remembers them and kills them anyway. After returning to the start, Faye explains that like the players, the angel also seems to remember what it has already experienced. So perhaps the angel has stored the girl's smell and considers it a contamination problem. The girls seriously think about how to solve this, and after a while they realize they could go to the room and bathe in the waterfall they found. The girls tell Faye to wait for them at the treasure room and run off at full speed since they are going to bathe in bikinis and do not want Faye to see them. After a while, the girls return and summon the angel. It tells them it now senses their purity and grants them the wish to open the door. Everyone cheers, but the angel also mentions that nothing a girl hates more than being told she smells bad, so they went to bathe and ended up playing around in the water for a while. Ouroboros even saved Pearl from a monster that appeared in that area. After a long conversation, the group enters the room and finds it packed with treasure. On top of a mountain of gold, there is a master key for the treasure room. Lesia tells everyone they can now carry more objects with them, since from the very beginning Meep had told them they could only carry 2 objects at a time. Meep appears and congratulates them for reaching the room, adding they are very close to the final boss of the game. A trapdoor then opens beneath them and they fall through. In a scene change, Kurlik informs Dax they have been summoned as a second rescue team for Faye. Dax gets extremely excited because he always knew their destinies would bring them back together, and after the last loss, he has been wanting to see Faye again. He also says this labyrinth will help them connect even more. Kurlik tells him he should not call it a destined reunion since Dax is the one going to find Faye and not the other way around. Dax excitedly tells Kurlik it is time to go find Faye and help him. Back with Faye, after falling into a room, the group thinks they are now in the boss arena. Faye reads a sign left by the ancient goddess saying she grew bored because no human had ever reached this far. Lesia thinks there might be a way to revive the god since the entire labyrinth and its monsters can regenerate. The group tries using the resurrection bell to bring the goddess back, but it does not work. Faye thinks the percentage above his head might be related to reviving the god. Since the sign says no human has ever completed the game, they might need to explore the entire labyrinth to raise that percentage to 100. He then comes up with the idea of gathering all the people in the labyrinth to share information and speed things up. A couple of hours later, Ashlyn returns to the game and is stunned by all the strange objects they have gathered. Faye tells everyone to bring him anything unusual they find and leave it in that location. He also shows Ashlyn the treasure room master key. Their conversation is interrupted when the girls arrive with big news. They took the sick, fluffy creatures to the waterfall where they bathed, and after putting them in the water, they returned to normal, and thanked them by taking them to their village, where they receive some kind of object that prevents any other fluffy creature in the labyrinth from attacking them. For several hours, everyone in the labyrinth explores and encounters a rubber boss in the area. Back with Faye, Nell has found a secret door and the group immediately enters. After searching the area, they find a gem, and our Robber Rose remarks that her own dragon-shaped gems were much more beautiful. Their moment is interrupted by a statue in the room, which transforms into a kind of monster robot. It tells them all the monsters they fought previously are weaklings compared to it, but our Robber Rose gets tired of listening and with a single punch takes it out. Meep then appears and gives her a red card for another violation, so the goddess is expelled from the game. Just before disappearing, she asks Faye to complete the games and get out of there. Several hours later, everyone in the labyrinth has their percentage at 99.9. Then Pearl appears and announces she found the last mechanism that was missing. They enter a portal and find a kind of game involving a small pool. The game seems impossible because they need to roll several 24-sided dice and get the same number on all of them, which would statistically require 200 million attempts for even one chance of success. The group is then interrupted by the arrival of Dax and Kurlik. After a long conversation, Dax says it is time to shine, and after cleaning the dice and throwing them purely on luck, all of the dice come up showing the same face. A flash of light emerges and a mirror appears before them. This object allows them one single time to nullify an entire team's defeat. After obtaining it, Dax and Kurlik take their leave and wish everyone luck. But just as Dax leaves, he is completely stunned to see the percentage is at 99.999. The group is very nervous because they have already explored the entire labyrinth. Faye thinks it over and concludes the answer is in the giant hole they found at the very beginning. They head there, and after going through it, the percentage finally reaches 100. The group is then teleported to where the final boss is located, and Faye thinks the answer was at the very beginning all along. A new bell then sounds and a small pyramid in the room explodes, from which emerges the goddess Anubis, who excitedly tells them it is time to play. Everyone watching from outside Elements is very nervous seeing Faye's group about to face the goddess. Anubis immediately summons many of the creatures and bosses they fought throughout the labyrinth. An attack falls from the sky and the group uses their umbrellas to block it. But the attack was so poorly aimed, it causes the monsters to eliminate each other. Faye tells the goddess he now understands her true weakness, which is that she is an absolute disaster at everything she does. Pearl then fires a missile using one of the objects they obtained, but the goddess is unharmed and summons 100 golden fluffy creatures in response. Anubis thinks the group has finally met their match, but Faye immediately pulls out the fluffy creature's peace emblem and they all immediately retreat. Faye thinks it is time to counterattack and starts heading toward her, but the goddess fires a powerful laser that instantly eliminates them. Because of the resurrection mirror, they respawn immediately, and Anubis without hesitation begins bombarding them with a series of attacks. Faye tries to pull out an object, but Anubis cancels the magic. Just as the goddess is about to finish them off with her laser, Nell jumps forward and kicks the attack with enough force to block it. The group ends up a bit hurt, and Anubis tells them she will attack again with something far more powerful. Faye and the group tries to escape, and the goddess summons monsters to prevent this. Just as they are about to take a laser hit, Pearl uses her gate ability to teleport everyone somewhere else, and after the laser hits the temple it creates a massive explosion. The group returns to the goddess and she seems very satisfied with the games, telling them she had not felt people enjoying her games in a very long time. With a smile on her face, she grants them victory. Everyone is overjoyed, and as a final gift, the goddess hands Faye an object. Her final words before disappearing are that if he ever wants to play again, he only needs to wake her. After vanishing, everyone both inside and watching the screens outside is completely excited by the victory Faye and his team achieved. A long while later, the group exits the goddess's elements and is welcomed as heroes. Miranda greets them and congratulates everyone for all the hard work they did. On the other hand, she is a little exhausted herself, but Lesia tells Pearl this is just the beginning and there are still many more gods games to explore. Finally, we see both Ouroboros and Lesia competing over Faye, arguing about whether they should keep playing games or not. But Faye, very determined, tells them he will keep playing because he wants to remember and find the woman he saw in his past. Miranda then asks Faye if he wishes to continue with the rest of the gods' games, and he says yes. Several days later, the group enters yet another game, continuing their quest to reach 10 victories against the gods. And that is where the season ends.